So here's the thing. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Kelly, and we're here to talk about books. Today, as usual, is an unscripted video. I'm just gonna babble at you about an oopsie that I made. Also, I'm in a new location. I moved. I have a bookshelf now with all my books on it. Look how pretty they are. I'm so happy. So great. Sorry my face is shiny though. We're working on the lighting. We'll get there. It'll be fine. Without further ado, let me tell the story of how I thought I was done with my book, and I heckin' wasn't. So, a little bit ago now, a month or two or so, I don't know, I finished my book, and I made a video about it. I was posting on Instagram about it. More than that, I wrote a query letter, I wrote a synopsis, I looked into a bunch of agents, and I started querying. I was very confident that I was done. And yet, here we are. You've read the title of the video. If you've watched literally any of my videos where I talk for even a fraction of a moment about the book that I've written, you will know that this is the first book that I have ever completed. I've been writing for 15 years, but could you... That's fine. Okay. I've been writing for 15 years. I've written a lot, but I never have completed a book before. So I didn't know what to expect when it came to finishing my book. I didn't know what that was supposed to feel like. I was really relying upon things I'd seen given as writing advice, or, you know, things that I'd seen other writers say about how they felt when their book was done. And the widest advice that I have seen, and this remains true, is that your book is done, your book is ready to query when you have made it as good as you can. That includes getting feedback, taking feedback, doing several rounds of edits, etc., etc. And I was there. I felt like my book was as good as I could make it on my own. Unfortunately, the wording of that advice, it turns out, does not work for me. Now that I have come through the other side, I realize that while that advice I don't think is wrong or bad, the wording of it made me make some false decisions. A month or two ago, whenever this was, I was fully convinced that my book was as good as I could make it on my own. That did not mean that it no longer had any issues that I could identify. It did have issues that I could identify. It actually had two quite glaring issues that I had been cognizant of from the beginning. There was a scene near the beginning of the book where everything just stopped so we could get like a roll call of characters, and that I always was uncomfortable with, but I didn't know how to do that without doing that. That makes sense. It's quite an ensemble cast, and I didn't know how to introduce all of these characters without having this moment where everything just kind of stops and we get to focus on that. And then the second thing was, in the middle of the book, there is a 2-month time skip. Nothing happens plot-wise during those 2 months, but quite a lot happens character-wise and relationship-wise during those 2 months. And I was worried that if I wanted to do anything to fill in that time, to touch on those relationship things, to touch on those character things, it would first of all be really boring and slow because no real plotty stuff was happening. But I was also worried that it would add too much to my word count. See, this book is an adult fantasy, and generally for debuts, the word count expectation for that is that it'll be under 120,000 words, and that's an absolute maximum. My book was at like 119.5 or something like that. And so I really didn't have any room to play with to be adding things. And so I just reached this point where I was like, you know what, I've gone through it all of these times, I've had people read it, I've taken feedback. I had done several rounds of developmental edits, I had done several rounds of line editing, I had proofread it, I had picked over it meticulously, I'd gone over and over and over it, and I reached this point where I was like, okay, I'm done. Because I can't make it better on my own. Even though I recognize that it can be better, and I see the ways in which it can be better, I just don't know how to do it. I need help. The problem with that is that I was wrong. It's hard because I wanted to be done so bad, and I know that that was part of it. I had been working on this book for over 2 years at that point, and I mean, like, every day. I only had another job for 6 months out of that time, and then I did some freelance editing work, but for the most part, my full-time job was writing this book. I was given the freedom to take time off work to work on it, and so that's all that I was doing. So I was spending a lot of time on this. I was just ready to be done. I was ready to query. I was ready to move on to the next part, and unfortunately, that made me hasty. And I also think that I just didn't want to admit to myself that after all the work that I had done, there were still these big problems. So there were really two things that happened that made me realize I really couldn't just let myself be done, that I really needed to revisit this manuscript. The first was that I was sending to industry professionals. I was sending sample pages to agents, and suddenly I realized how uncomfortable I was with the idea of industry professionals reading this version of my work, and that's very unfortunate because many of the agents that I queried and have since obviously been rejected by were people that I very deeply respect and would have loved to work with. And while I don't know with any of those agents if the rejection was even based on my sample pages or just on my query letter, which probably is not changing, it still sucks. Like, it would be nice to know that it was based upon the best version of my work, and it's my own fault that that's not what happened. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that I would have realized how much I needed to change it or that I could change it if I hadn't done that. So it's kind of just one of those things. I guess you live and learn. And secondly, the other thing that happened was that because I was querying, I did not want to work on book 2 of this series. The idea of it made me incredibly, incredibly uncomfortable because I just didn't know if this book was even going to get picked up, and I would rather have had something else to query should this book not get picked up rather than be working on book 2 and then, you know, have to not have anything else to show. So I started working on another book entirely. I wrote about a page and then freaked out and panicked because the prose of that page was better than 80% of what was in the book that I was querying. And I hated that feeling because I am a prose snob, and I love prose. I'm quite proud of my prose in general, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of the prose in the draft that I was trying to query just was simply not my best work. The reason it wasn't my best work was because as I had line edited the last few times, I didn't retype the manuscript. I was just working with what was on the page, and while I'm sure that's how a lot of people do it, and I'm sure that works for a lot of people, I don't think that was enough for me, at least not with this book. Maybe in future, now that I just have a better grasp of prose and my prose is more skillful, maybe working with it on the page will be feasible for future novels. But for this one, I really needed to go in and just retype the whole thing. And that's what I did. And it's really a testament to how much tighter and more skillful my prose is now, because the manuscript is now 5,000 words shorter than it was before, and that includes a chapter added in the middle to bridge that time skip gap and the reworked beginning. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of words. A lot of that was taken out with the reworked beginning, I think about 2,000 words. But that's still, like, 3,000 words taken out just through line editing. And I added an entire chapter that I think is, like, 2,000 words. Not only did I just make the writing way better, fix the huge glaring issues that I had been having since the beginning, I added more stuff. I added little lines here and there. I fleshed out some subplots just a little bit, just little things to kind of amp up what matters. I am so much happier with where it is now, and I'm glad that I allowed myself to do this, but it's so strange the way that finishing a novel feels. And I think that I had always kind of expected, and this is why I kind of fell into this trap, I think, is because I did always kind of expect that I would never be fully happy with anything that I wrote. That in the end, I would always feel like, oh, I could keep doing this, and at some point you just have to decide that you're done. And that is true. Like, yes, I could do another pass on my book and tweak some words here and there and whatever, but now I'm at a point where I could keep going over and over and over and over and over this book again and again, but I would not be changing anything significant anymore. In the process of traditionally publishing, if an agent or an editor or someone was like, here's something you might want to think about for marketability reasons, or there's always the possibility of things that I hadn't caught, or maybe that aren't coming across the way that I want them to, but as far as like, is what is on the page what I want to be there, and am I proud of everything on the page? Yes, I'm happy with every sentence. And that was not how I felt before, and I didn't think that I needed to feel that way, but I did. I did need to feel that way, and I think the difference for me, because on the one hand, yes, now I actually am at the point where this book is as good as I can make it on my own. So I understand why that wording is used, especially when it's being given as advice by people who have finished books before and who do know what it feels like. However, for me, hearing that in that way, in those words, allowed me to kind of excuse certain issues in my book with just like, well, I can't do it on my own. Yeah, there are issues here, but I'll fix them when I have someone to help me. And I'm not saying that that's entirely horrible. Like, I could see situations in which that kind of makes sense, but also, if you can see the issue that's there, most likely you can fix it. Like, if you can tell that there's some kind of technical issue with your work, you can probably fix it. If not right this moment, like, you can probably let your manuscript rest and fix it later. Or you can get feedback from beta readers or an editor or whoever and get it fixed. And I suppose the difference to me is that it's not about, is the book as good as I feel capable of making it right now? It's, am I happy with everything that is in the book right now? And that feeling is so above and beyond anything that I had felt on previous drafts when I was done, or thought I was done, or thought that I was close to being done. Now, this feeling, this like, I'm happy with all of it and I don't want to change any of it, is a uniquely singular feeling. That is like, for the first time, I feel confident about the idea of industry professionals reading my book. I feel confident about the idea of strangers reading my book. I feel confident about the idea of my mother reading my book. I still don't want her to read the sex scene, but like, in terms of the skill level, this is the first time that I have felt that way. So I guess, I mean, it's all so amorphous and subjective. So I suppose what I really want to say is that you are probably more capable of a writer than you think you are. You are probably a better problem solver than you think you are. And that's really so much of what storytelling is problem solving. And, you know, if there are things in your work that you just don't think you can handle, put it down for a while. Ask for a second opinion. Like, I understand this attitude of like, an artist's work is never done and at some point you have to cut yourself off. I get that. I genuinely do. But if you're cutting yourself off before you're happy with everything, that's different entirely. You deserve to bring your book to its highest point, and you deserve to feel the sense of accomplishment that comes with figuring it out yourself. I mean, and that includes if you're getting feedback. You know, feedback doesn't generally mean here's the issue and here's exactly how to solve it and let me do the work for you. I mean, even if it comes from getting feedback, you're still taking that feedback and working it into your vision of the story, and you're doing the legwork to actually change what's on the page. And when it comes to, you know, whether you are self-publishing and so you're, you know, going to be putting your work out just into the world, or if you are going the traditional route and you are, you know, going to be querying, etc., you deserve to have your best work going forward from whenever it leaves your hands. And if you just write for yourself, but you still want to feel like your book is done, then you deserve to have that feeling. And you can do it. You are a writer and you are capable. There are all sorts of qualifiers I could put in here. I mean, maybe you don't have the tools to solve these problems right now, but that doesn't mean that you have to abandon this work. Not to say that you can't abandon work if it's no longer serving you or is no longer something you wish to pursue. Feel free. Shelve your books. Do it. Honestly. Sometimes we grow faster than we can write. I certainly did. That's why I never finished a book before. As usual, I have devolved into just incoherent babbling, but I hope that this has done something. If anything, just to say that it's okay to screw up, and it's okay to overestimate yourself sometimes and then realize you were wrong. And you know, I feel like I made a pretty big screw up by, you know, moving on to the next step before being as sure as I should have been. But I also know how sincerely I believed that I was done. So I have to forgive myself, I suppose. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe, I guess.